I was down for a doctor's appointment. It was downtown. I was 10 years old or 8 years old, something like that. And we had time to kill. And she said, well, we should go to the Board of Trade. They have the Visitor's Gallery. Of course, there were no financials back then. I won't say how old I am, but it was before financials. And I was amazed by it. And I thought it was fantastic. And I just watched it and read everything in the Visitor Center. And at the time, I was delivering newspapers, and one of the papers I would deliver, so I must have been 10, was the Wall Street Journal. I started reading the Journal for a little while as a 10-year-old and found it all fascinating. I know that sounds a little silly perhaps, but it stuck in my mind, and I didn't think about it again for many, many years. And I stopped reading the Journal and read the sports pages a little more. But that was sort of what got me interested in coming down to the Exchange. And so in the 80s, I said, you know what, I'm going to go down there. I didn't really know anybody at all. I just go door to door, and I wound up with a job, before the day was over, and I was working for a firm, GNP, which was, a Merck, which is where I started, the old Merck before a couple moves, and worked in the financials when T-bills were king and CDs were traded, and Eurodollars were just a little pit on the side that nobody was sure would trade anything, and it worked out. I was making $175 a week to start out. I wasn't a runner. I was like a little step up. I'd had some business background. And the next thing you know, I was on the phones and talking to people. And a few months later, I was making $300 a week, then $600 a week, and then on and on. I started out with the members' rights. There was those were the old orange jackets at the CME back in the day. And if you could have a quarter, a half, 3/4, and a full, and eventually got you either a full seat or an IMM. Those have gone away. You've had to combine them all to have something. But when I worked at GNP, they gave me a seat or let me use one of their seats so that I could trade and solicit business. So back then, but then I went on to, of course, I should have listened to Brian Monis, and he said, you're doing a great job, Paul. I think you should buy a seat. We'll buy a seat. I'm like, doesn't he know how much I make? The seats were $40,000 then. And I can't afford $40,000. I was making a little less than that, which was still good money, but I didn't realize he was going to finance it and help me. Little did I know. But I owned comms, IOMs, fulls, still have trading rights, AMs. I don't know if I've ever owned items and what have you, but the number of seats leased, bought, partnerships, we bought them because we needed them to trade with. Yeah, you'd run into people and to talk to them that wanted to get in the business. They hear you were in it. But my brothers, they came down. My brother Clifford is still in the business. He works at CQG, I would think with a man you called the most interesting man in the world at one time, whose locker's not far from ours at the Union League Club. And then one of my other brothers who was also, he went to work for Hong Kong, Shanghai, and actually then he left and went to work for my old business partner as he started a pharmaceutical business after the floor closed and we were bought out by some Dutch banks back in the day. I moved to my parents. I had a little place at my parents for a little while, so I had a little safety net that allowed me to go at that time. So my family was helpful in that I didn't have too many expenses to get down there, and then of course I wanted to work on the floors and became successful at it. So, and then my wife and her family. She owned memberships as well and still does, I guess, and as her family still does. Her grandfather was an old grain trader. He started out, actually was a policeman that grew up near Daly, was on Daly's bodyguard way back in the day, and then trading got good and just did that. Brought his kids in, his son, two of his sons were members. My father-in-law was probably one of the largest corn traders, spreader for a while. They still have memberships. My mother-in-law was on the floor, one of the earlier women that was down there. And I forget who's the first woman, Mickey. Actually, they're all partners in the White Sox. So I run into them from time to time. So the whole family. That's how I got elected to the board of directors. Is I got the family vote, and they told vote for my son-in-law is really a nice kid, and that was about all you needed back in the day. The camaraderie on the trading floor was good. You had your moment. Guys had to fight, and especially if you were a smaller trader in the bond pit, and guys wanted to push. Guys would get there early to get a spot. But for me, I was on the desk primarily. I rarely went into the pit to fill some orders. One time it was not disastrous, just physically, I tried to jump over a railing and landed part way. Got the order filled though, by the way. But the camaraderie is good. You talk to you work with guys, and it's like anywhere, you could have your conflict, but my partner and I, we were together for almost 18 years. We looked out for each other. We had groups of guys. I mean, some of the fun times was on the old floor when, even as floor chair, I could get myself more space in the area where we probably had an area of maybe a little bit wider than my reach, and at least around the end, I had 11 guys. And we used to write, you'd lean in to answer the phone, you come back, you had to write up an order, you'd stamp, and it was just sort of that music. So you got close and you work with people, you'd talk to guys at the pit because your brokers wanted to take care of you. And so it could be fun. Yeah, there's fine. There's push guys would think that somebody took their order, or, some of the physical, or physicality in the pit where guys were, belly button the back where you turn and 8 guys. That's why I had to put in railings in the pit. So because guys were falling out, people were breaking their arms and what have you back in the day. But to me, it was a great place to work. Yeah, there are a few problems, and hopefully you could help fix some of those problems. And otherwise, you had some good friendships. Back when I started, it was awesome. I mean, if you had a decent brain and you worked hard, you could make a ton of money. If you were in the pit and you had it was a different way to trade back then. If it was more who you knew, and also some of what you knew. I mean, people used to ask, well, what should I study in school? And I used to tell people, well, you might want to study psychology a little bit more. You might want to know what guys are thinking. Is that guy sweating for a reason? And is he a big trader? Is it going to cost him money that he's long? Maybe you want to push him. Of course, that would depend. Some days, yawners. Some days are so exciting. I started back when the financials opened up at 8 o'clock in the morning. So before they moved to 7:30, and then they realized that was a mistake. They moved to 7:30 because of all the economic releases were at 7:30, and the government had moved them there. So we opened it at 7:20. So 7:20 wasn't so bad. It was at 7:30 that things might hit the fan, and it could be really crazy. The first interview I ever did was for the PBS has a news program. I forget what it's called, and it was taped. Actually, this is 1990, I want to say. Yeah, and it was the Gulf War started that. And I had talked actually, well, what's going to happen? I said, well, the market will probably sell off, but don't buy that because you're not going to have the same whatever problems with the treasuries. And we told our customers, our clients are that if it happens, or because we thought there would be the war or whatever. And I actually started to watch myself. My partner called me, hey, they're bombing, in the Middle East. I turned myself off, which like, oh my God, this is my first time. I wanted to watch, but what actually wound up going down, we had night bonds that just started recently. We went down to the trading floor, and we were busier than you could believe. Market was traded. We enjoyed it. It was a great night, had fun. One of the negatives was that we had a drink afterwards at 9 o'clock, and we didn't know as our garage closed at 10. We were never there that late. So at 10:15, we couldn't get our cars to go home, so we had to take cabs home and cabs back the next day. But it was fun. We made some money. Our customers were very happy. I think every day, it became so enjoyable to be down there. But I guess, well, it's always when you're struggling, right, starting up. And I remember, bonds closing at 2 o'clock. And at 2:01, I was trying to figure out how I was going to trade the next day. I just remember being so in love with being down. I didn't want the day to end. That was probably good that it did. You wind up stressed out, and people talk about stress. You need some, but not too much. But for me, it was just the whole lifestyle. The fact that you were involved in world events, something would happen somewhere that would affect the markets, and so that it was fun in that sense. Probably my worst day was a kid that used to work for me had a nervous breakdown, and to have to talk him down and work. I just had a sort of a reality break. I felt bad, but we got him some help, and he actually came back. That was probably my worst day. I just felt so bad for that friend and colleague. Try to be as opportunistic and cautious at the same time. I didn't take too many risks. When I felt like we had some technicals that would match up with some information, we might, my partner. Sometimes he and I would trade together. We'd take a little bit more risk when we do that. We would take make some of our bigger trades in the option market than we would in the future side of things. My style was just that. It was more tactical in nature. Yeah, we had fundamentals, and we'd listen to news, and we had some great information because we talked. Our clients were around the world. I remember one day, I wish I had made. We happened to be talking to a chemical bank guy in Tokyo, guy David Wong, and Chinese guy working in Tokyo. But anyway, there was a rumor that Tokyo had an earthquake, and I happened to be talking to him, and the market had dropped a full point, the bond market, and I'm like, I'm trying to what's going on? And there was an earthquake in Tokyo. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, David, look out your window. You're in the office. Look out the windows. Is there any? And he was up high. Do you see fire? Is there anything going on? Did you feel a shake? There's supposed to be an earthquake by you. And he goes, what? He goes, no. I said, well, look outside. See if it's, maybe you didn't feel. He goes, there's nothing. I said, well, then we need to start buying something here because this is just not. He took a bigger position than he normally would. He was a 10-lot trader that he bought 50. And we bought. I wish you always wish we bought more when it's. And the market rallied right back within 10 minutes, or something or less. And it was all on a false rumor. And I happened to be luckily talking to the right guy at the right time. So that was fun to make a little extra money when you had it wasn't necessarily inside information. It was just information that was readily available to the world. Somebody made a statement. Oh, the Postbank they're going to be selling bonds. Well, I would have to say it was more of a bull. I started after the bear market, if you will, in the financials in the 80s. And part of it was after I had gotten into technical analysis and took some classes and studied and what have you, there was a huge head and shoulders bottom, if you will. And I said, this is going to be a massive increase. And I became bullish at that time because of seeing it. Not that I knew that, inflation is going to go away and the movement. It was more technical in nature and people went on. So I remained a bull. And I also, there was a time, Michael Steinhardt used to be one of our clients back before, the first time he stopped being a hedge fund. And one of his partners, Milton Berg, who's still around, brilliant guy, he told Avi, all right, start buying a bond. I don't want to see, I don't want to see an 88-24 print. And he's like, well, what does that mean? Just keep buying. I don't want to see it. If it gets there, you screwed up. I don't want to see a print. Well, you got to give me a number. He said, well, all right, buy 15,000 and start. We wound up getting 3,000 off was it. And then that was the bottom forever. Being on the floor, studying, going to a few classes and reading. That was it. That's how I learned to trade options. And then it expanded through experience. One of our main option broker, John Kelly, developed a product called Pro Opticus. It's still out there. And it was fantastic. This product. Matter of fact, he was selling it to some of our clients and banks. More people would have bought it, but he was only selling it for $650 a month, I think, at the time. And they were telling, John, you got to raise the price. People think it's too cheap. They were buying inferior systems for $2,000 a month. He said, raise the price. I said, well, what should I charge? $1,500. So they wouldn't buy any for $650, but there were groups that would buy 10 for $1,500 a piece. And it was that was a great, because then I could play. It was all this is what if scenarios, and I could look at things and then you learn the business, and so I sort of just through experience. It didn't affect me as much. I was a little disappointed with the way it came down. I remember a guy, O'Malley, who used to fill. What did he fill for me? Yen or something, way back in the day at the Merc in the currencies, and he went to jail, I think, for $12.50, which seems kind of goofy. But they've got to spend all this money and need a case. Well, we got to put somebody in jail, so. They went after guys. I mean, you don't want anything to be done wrong. And some of the worst trade was that curb. We talked about curb trading, and I knew it was wrong because guys told me, no, you can't do anything after. People are doing so. Well, why? You shouldn't do it, and especially when those people with those black jackets are here, because they'll bust you, and it's gonna you get fined. And I didn't know what was what, but people weren't doing it. They're helping out customers, they're helping out people, which is why it became legal after. More when I was the floor conduct chair, there were guys that were being a little inappropriate with women, and I would have to talk to them about their behavior and try to make it a better, because it could be a locker room a little bit. And I had my mother-in-law was a member there, my wife, so I was sensitive to some of the issues that they may have, and especially in a male dominated world. Sometimes guys forget that they're supposed to be gentlemen. After all, our word is our bond, and you need to remember that while you're down there. So those are some uncomfortable things. And I know there was a little bit of drugs that would occasionally be on the floor. Jack Egan used to be the head of security, and he would usually work it out. I would find out, and they often had guys arrested away from the exchange, so we didn't wind up in the press. It wasn't that much, but it was there. And people were going to do what they're going to do, but you didn't want drugs being sold back and forth on the trading floor. And so you made sure that, a lot of that didn't happen. There was some bug eating contests one time. What used to be prevalent when you were bored, the guys used to do this fold a trading card into a shark and like try to clip it on somebody's jacket and shark. And it's just stupid little things like that. I remember hearing stories, guys would tell, more so when there was smoking, that guys would be smoking a cigar or a cigarette and they would flick their ashes in the guy standing next to them's pocket. And I've heard that there were a couple fires that started, but I wasn't part of it. I didn't see those. I just heard the stories. But yeah, there were hijinks. Guys would prank guys, or there's sometimes people would come and put cream or Vaseline or something on your phone. You'd put it up to your ear, or put graphite, and so you'd walk around with a big black ring around your ear. So nothing too bad. I know there are other things that went on. I just didn't necessarily see some of those hijinks. I know there are a lot of guys that had big hearts that helped people. People were involved in charities and other things. One of the guys that struck me was the guy, Charlie DeFrancesca, back when I was first starting. His great deed didn't necessarily cost him his life, but maybe prolonged it a little bit. He was probably the largest trader at the bond pit, or one of the largest. This is in the 80s, mid to late 80s. And he would stop, the newest floor runner would ask a question about bonds, and he would stop and answer it. Kind guy. You had other people like, get out of my face, or push you out of the way. They were rude people. He always had time for whoever you were. Didn't care what you. His brother had some cancer, bone marrow cancer, I believe was the type, and he was going in to be tested to see if he could donate bone. As it turned out, he went in. He had it worse than his brother, and he was in the hospital and out of the hospital. In the end, he missed trading so much that he would come in. He would have a limo bring him to the floor, for safety and. For bouncing around because it was pain. He'd wear a flak jacket, and guys would stand around him so that he could trade, and he wouldn't get hurt because it was tight. Back in the day when we built the new floor, back when I was chair, the average man has 18 inches across. The average top step floor broker had 17 inches of space. Now you put up your arms, and guess what? People are moving, and so that tightness is where he stood. And guys made sure that he had, and people respected it. So you saw a guy that was, and he died eventually, but you saw a guy that was kind, and then the people around him took care of him so that his last days could be enjoyable for him, doing something other than staring at, whatever, the Donna Reed show or something, whatever was on TV back in the day in a hospital room. Your word is your bond down there. There are guys that wouldn't own up to trades, and people stopped trading with them. And if you weren't honest and fair about things, you saw that people would shut you out and not want to deal with you. And it taught me to do that. And I was surprised when you see other businesses. I won't pick on real estate, but maybe I just did. And people would say things and then not honor them. It shocked me to hear stories of people. Whereas on the floor, somebody, I knew guys that could have walked away from $100,000 losses that owned up to them. And I saw that honesty is the best policy. My Word is My Bond is that historical book. I don't know if you've seen it, that Mrs. Bronstein wrote. And, I thought it was a good title. It's what people had to do. Yeah, people aren't perfect. I'm not claiming that. But I think it was great that people trusted each other to a great extent. Not perfect, but to a great extent. I guess all my life I've always, even in college, I was, student government, and I was head of student affairs for a little while, and as a dorm student, I'd started a refrigerator rental system that, I don't remember back a long time ago. I think it was $100 a semester or something, and I said, well, let's buy. I got the school to buy them, and then they leased them as opposed to this other company, which would pay for all the student activities for the year and then some. And so it's like, so they've got so I'd always been involved in something, and even in other student council. So I guess I wanted to get involved. Plus, I knew that if you want to know people and it's a great way to do it. So I had always wanted to do it. Became involved in the committee I talked about, and eventually, as I was elected to the board of directors, became the chairman of those things. So I've always wanted to be involved and try to make the place, I'm involved in a little bit better, at least through my eyes, whatever that may be. But I'd like to think we left a good mark. I mean, we had created the Fed fund conscious. Dow Jones wasn't as big as we want, but the exchange made money. We fixed some of the delivery processes in agriculture. You had the treasuries that I talked about and how we fixed that. But even on the floor side, back in the old days with the old floor before we built it before '97, Norm Coyne was at First Boston. He needed an extra half a booth space, and we had no booth. We were out of space. That's why we were talking about and built a new. We're out of space. We're missing a lot of business because we had no room. I wound up moving 22 different, to get him his half booth space, I wound up talking to 22 different firms and moved 40 different booth spaces to accommodate him. One to accommodate other people. Well, you know what? I could actually use it. But the fact of the matter is we moved everything around and everybody was happy. Anybody that wanted something got something. And so that was sort of the fun side of being involved and like, okay, now I've got to talk to all this. So it took hours and days to talk to all these people and say, well, if I can get you this, can you move? Can you accommodate? What about this? And you don't use this space, right? How about if we'll take care of it? So those are fun. It was all fun. Oh, in the early 90s. We had something called Aurora. Now, Aurora it was designed to simulate the pit more so. We actually talked about virtual reality trading and having headsets, it's really still, well, it kind of is there. And we talked about, well, how do you find somebody that virtually punches somebody in the eye with a pen and all this stuff? And, we'll see what happens. But Aurora was set that, okay, my acronym was LSU, because I couldn't get any of my initials and saw some guy with SMU back in the day. And I said, oh, I'll just do my college. So anyway, you could have LSU here, SMU there, JL, and then if I wanted to sell bonds, I could sell to that guy, but I would click on who I like, and it never really took off, and it wasn't. And then so then I was actually first went on the board, Globex. Actually, another thing I was actually a little proud of at the time is I had the Merck. Was when I first on the board. I read everything, and the way the contract was written with the Merck and Reuters is Reuters basically owned everything in 10 years. I'm like, that's nuts. Why would we want to go? If you could change this contract, I think, and we did do something with Globe. So I'd had an involvement and watch it go, and I was responsible for the synergy with Eurex, or at least my committee was. I mean, you had everybody got involved in something that big. But then I went out and did conferences with Eurex and other things around the world and what have you. So I saw it coming. I saw the movement. And earlier, remember we talking about every time you brought the customer closer to I saw that it was going to come. And of course we'd sold out, and the timing worked for me in a lot of ways, but I also could see that it was going to happen. And you're not going to need the guys on the floor. Why would you? And of course we know electronic trading is so much better, because I'd have a guy that might buy 1,000 bonds with me, and they go the wrong way. He doesn't want to call me back. He wants to call somebody else to get out and take his loss, and because he gets, oh yeah, I got out. You don't embarrass it. Whereas electronic trading, you make mistake after mistake. Nobody knows. Your ego's not hurt. Hopefully, you still, pardon me, you're making money. But I guess I saw it coming, just because I was involved. Maybe it's because of the exchange leadership, and you saw more of it, and you could see how the world would go. And then I had all these computer guys whispering in my ear saying, "You're going to go this way." Well, they were right. I don't know what I would have changed, other than probably educating myself a little bit better about how some of the things worked in clearing and what have you. There was there was definitely some business that we missed because I didn't understand how the clearing worked back in the day. And had I known a few things, it would have brought millions, I think, in revenues for us, or for my trading group that we didn't know about. Back in the day, we had a great rate from Harris. They had a clearing or futures outfit that was just subordinated debt of $4 million, so there wasn't a lot of money there. And they were also only charging $4 around turn, which may seem really high today. It was a great deal back then. And I was doing business with a mutual fund who was not legally allowed to put up margin money, but could put money in an account that the clearing firm could grab should they need to, should they default or whatever. But if they did, that made that the mutual fund was violating the law, and they could get in a lot of trouble. Well, what was happening was they were trading thousands a day, and they were paying $20 a round turn back then. Part of that was to make up for what you couldn't. Where I'm going to, bottom line, Harris grabbed their money, and they almost wanted to kill me. They said, you do it again, you're fired. Well, Harris did it again. What I wish I had known is I should have shared a little more with Harris, because you're talking about somebody doing, 30, 40, 50,000 contracts in a month, paying $20 a round turn. That's a ton of money. And, this is back in the mid-'80s, so it was great to have. So I wish I'd known that and a couple other little things that would have allowed us to take in more business. Didn't know. Back in the late 90s, we sold out to a Dutch firm, ING, which we had been part of, clearing and helped with Les Rosenthal when he started back in the early 90s. And when they bought us out, they took me off the floor a little bit. And of course, I was on the board of directors of the exchange and doing some of the, chairing. I also chaired market product development. So my job was the liaison, but with Globex, Eurex, with Dow Jones and those things were sort of my responsibility. And I sort of saw the coming change. I mean, I know we'd had some clients whose husbands were in the computer business. Why isn't this all computerized? This was 95. Computers weren't fast enough. Heck, in 2003 or 4, I was still rebooting my computer a few times a day because TT's system wasn't running quite right, and computers weren't as good as they are today. But I saw the disintermediation of the broker, and I actually thought you should have had people calling straight into the pit and doing things. Every time, I'm going to digress a little bit, every time you brought the customer closer to the marketplace, volume has grown. I had guys that were, you shouldn't, allow phones on the floor. You shouldn't allow flash, and you're going to kill the business. I had to argue when we were building the new floor with guys that, didn't want anybody to see. They wanted it flat as could be. I had to argue. I loved how it was, and I'd like more tiering, because if once you bring the customer closer, you grow the business. And you've got salesmen all around the pit. And if a salesman doesn't know his product, he's not going to sell it as well. Let these guys sell. They were worried, Tom Baldwin was probably the largest trader at the time. They're going to look at Tom. And people had put guys in the pit, watch Tom all day to count what he's doing so they could, to figure it out, and they couldn't keep up. How is somebody from a desk, when a guy 5 feet away just staring at him can't figure it out? It just was impossible. It was foolish, but you had that old thought. No, we're members. Let me have my edge. But the business was built on shrinking the bid-ask spread. I mean, that's how the Ginnie Maes and what have you, got their foothold. I mean, think about how wide that bid-ask was back in the day. It tightened and tightened and tightened. And guys forgot that. Well, and of course now history tells us that was the right way to go. Well, the right way to go was do some other things too, but in electronics. And I mean, look at all the wealth that we created for the members.